Edward Laemmle probably isn't a name you know if you're just a casual film enthusiast, but he is a really important part of Universal history. His life is full of struggle, success, adventures around the world, and Universal's first $1 million movie. I'm Antonia Carlotta, and this is Universally Me, the channel for all things Universal. My family started Universal, and Edward Laemmle was my great-grandfather. Now, just like every other video, I am going to tell you the facts of Eddie's life, but more than any other video, I am going to share with you guys, like, family lore and the stories that have been passed down. This is a little intimidating for me. One, he's a very important person to me, and also because I know that through a modern lens, some of his accomplishments are kind of controversial, and I don't know how everything's going to be received today. But like I said, he's really important, and I'm really excited to share him with you. Edward Laemmle was born October 25th, 1887 in Chicago, Illinois. His mother, Paula, was a singer, and his father, Joseph, worked for a German newspaper. And I'm pretty sure that Paula and Joseph met somehow corresponding through that paper. As far as I know, Eddie had a relatively normal childhood. His parents were only married for 8 years, and unfortunately I don't know the whole story there. But then in 1909, his father was working for the Family Theater in Muscatine, Iowa, and he met Carrie Belle Norton. And they got married, and that marriage would bring into the world my Aunt Carla Laemmle, who many of you knew. Eddie was going to electrical school in Chicago, but in 1915, when Universal moved from the East Coast to where it is now, Uncle Carl convinced Eddie to leave school and come move to Universal. Eddie started working as a carpenter there. He was kind of just taking any job he could get. He was an assistant director under John Ford for a bit, making a lot of westerns. And generally speaking, Eddie was very drawn to directing. Now, it's in 1919 that the adventure really gets started. Carl Laemmle sends Edward Laemmle on a 2-year expedition to Asia. He goes to China, Japan, Indonesia, Malaysia, Borneo, Singapore, Papua New Guinea, and Thailand, though I think it was called Siam at the time. And I actually pulled these 2 books off of my bookshelf that have to do with this expedition. One is called The Isle of Vanishing Men, which was written by his expedition partner, William F. Alder. And then the other is this guidebook to Bangkok and Siam, written in 1904, but it was given to my great-grandfather. It says, "With my warmest regards to my American friend, Edward Laemmle, Bangkok on the 8th of September, 1919. So for paid members, I'm going to make a separate video that goes way deeper into the stories of both of these books. In each location, Eddie and his expedition partner would film local villages and customs and wildlife. And for most people in North America and Europe, wherever they were seeing these movies, most people had never seen this world outside of their bubble before. Eddie filmed tiger hunts and volcanoes and local traditions. And I actually have a letter from Uncle Carl to Eddie's mother that says that William Alder, one day when they were filming, actually got knocked over by a tiger, which I'm sure made for a great film. And then there was his shipwreck. So in a letter from Eddie to his mom, in his own words, he says they leave Merauke on a bright sunny day. But it's monsoon season, so the weather changes really quickly. So suddenly it is pouring rain, it's windy, it takes them something like 4 days to go 60 miles. They're finally coming to shore, but the waves are crazy. The ship's getting knocked around. I think it maybe hits some rocks and it springs a leak and it starts sinking. Now, thankfully, they had the time and the wherewithal to grab all of their gear, their cameras. They get off the ship safely. And then they had the brilliant idea to start filming the ship as it was sinking. And they used this footage in a film called Shipwrecked Among Cannibals, which became Universal's first film to gross over $1 million, which was a huge accomplishment for the studio, for Eddie, super big. And I would give anything to see Shipwrecked, but it's lost. Now, this is where I have to pause and acknowledge that a lot of what they filmed wouldn't fly today. Yes, their ship was wrecked. Yes, they were now on shore with the Kaya Kaya people who, at some point in recent history, practiced cannibalism. But they definitely played things up for the camera and for the movie. Like, absolutely, I can acknowledge that and see it through this modern lens. And it can be really startling sometimes to see language that they used about the Kaya Kaya people in advertisements for the film. The other story that gets shared a lot in my family is that Great-Grandpa Eddie at some point filmed something he wasn't supposed to, and as a result was going to be ritualistically killed, until the American militia intervened and arranged a trade for his freedom. And then, I guess as an apparent apology, they gave him a statue and some other relics that he took home with him at the end of his journey. I have so many pictures that Eddie took from this time abroad, and they're incredible. I have often thought about going back and trying to find those places myself, but I know that nothing would look the same. When he came back, he continued working at Universal, mostly doing Westerns now. He worked a lot with Hoot Gibson. He made a couple really popular serials, including In the Days of Buffalo Bill and The Oregon Trail. So many of the films and serials that he made are lost now, so I haven't been able to see much of his work, but I think he was really talented. But on the other side, I also know that Uncle Carl was really tough on him behind the scenes. I've got lots of letters between the two where he's asking him to work faster, make things bigger, be more efficient. I think that Eddie felt like he was giving it his all, and he'd made their first $1 million movie, and he had these popular serials. He felt like he was giving great material, and it was hard for him not to get the respect and the recognition that he really thought he deserved. In 1922, Eddie met my great-grandmother Peppy for the first time. Peppy was Eddie's uncle's wife's sister, which I know sounds weird, but I think it was a little more common at the time. Peppy and her sister Frida were the daughters of Aaron Heller, who Uncle Carl had worked for as a kid in Ichenhausen, Germany. They got married on April 8th, 1923 at the Cooper Carlton Hotel in Chicago. In 1925, they had my grandmother Carlotta, who I think was named after a combination of Uncle Carl and Carlotta from Phantom of the Opera. And then in 1930, they had my great-aunt Connie. They lived on Rexford Drive in Beverly Hills, and they were a happy little family. That is, until disaster struck. So when Grandpa Eddie had been traveling abroad on his expedition, he had dengue fever. I think he actually had it twice. It's a mosquito-borne illness. The mosquitoes were really bad over there, especially during monsoon season. He talked about it in some of his notes that, like, not only were they sleeping under mosquito nets, but they would even have to eat their meals under mosquito nets. So I think that having dengue fever 2 times weakened his heart. On April 2nd, 1937, Edward Laemmle died suddenly of a heart attack at the dinner table. He was only 49 years old. Peppy and Carlotta were there when it happened, and his death, while tragic in itself, caused certain rifts and waves in my family that were never quite repaired. Earlier, I mentioned how the tribal members had given Eddie a statue and some other relics to apologize for maybe almost killing him. Well, now my great-grandmother Peppy was absolutely convinced that they were cursed and they caused his death. She didn't want any of it anywhere in her house, so she got rid of it all. I think she donated it. I often heard the Natural History Museum, but they haven't necessarily been able to find it. I've reached out to a couple other museums. I don't know where any of the stuff is, but it's not with us anymore. Then some of my other family members, and I think Rosabelle Laemmle might have been a part of this, convinced Peppy to move out of her house. They kind of thought that it was improper for a woman on her own to be living in such a big, beautiful house on her own. They didn't think that she could manage it. So she sold the place on Rexford and she moved into a much smaller place on Spalding. I think Peppy also began to resent Uncle Carl a little bit. Like maybe if Eddie hadn't traveled the world for Universal, he'd still be alive. Maybe if Carl had respected or appreciated him more, he wouldn't have been stressed. He wouldn't have had heart problems. He'd still be alive. And my family has never been good at talking about things. They're like downright bad at it. And so I think that this caused Pepe, Carlotta, and Connie not to be close to Uncle Carl in his last few years, and then not to be close to Junior over the next few decades. And most heartbreaking probably was what happened to my Aunt Connie. So, as I mentioned, my family was very proper and not good at talking about things. This is gonna come up here. Connie wasn't at the dinner table with Pepe and Carlotta. They kind of thought that she was too young, so she was eating in another room with their staff. So she didn't know that her dad died. And nobody told her for years, literally years. I think they said something like, oh, he was sick, he went away, he would be back. She didn't know her dad was dead. And it wasn't until a few years later that a friend of the family, in front of her, so she could hear it, said something like, oh, is that the little girl that doesn't know that her dad is dead? And that obviously broke her. That would break me. I think that Connie in her older years suffered with a lot of mental health issues that I think were rooted in that moment. Connie lived all the way until 2021. I got to spend a lot of time with her in my life. She was wonderful. One thing that I really loved with her was that I could show her pictures of her dad, of her when she was, 3 years old, and she could remember those moments like they were yesterday. And she always had stories to go with the photos. She would remember cute nicknames that my great-grandmother called my great-grandfather, stuff like that. I just feel bad. I think that Connie deserved so much better, and that was something really tough to come out of the death of Edward Laemmle. Eddie is somebody in my family that, of course, I never met him, but I feel like I know him so well. I feel that, so much of who I am must come from who he was. So much of the family that I grew up in must be a result of who he was and what his family was like. I always have had pictures and items from him around. I used to film Universally Me on the old wooden tripod that he used back in the 1920s. I've always felt this connection to him. He is just a really vital part of who I am. And, I've been probably scared to make this video for a long time. How do I talk about his work? How will it come across? How do I share his story without talking about all of these vulnerable parts of my family? Thank you guys all for being here. I feel like you're practically part of the family now that you know so much. If you enjoy these old Hollywood deep dives, please like and subscribe. Don't forget that paid members get tons of bonus content. I'm going to be sharing so many more pictures of Eddie and his work. I'm going to be deep diving into these books. And I just can't wait to share more of him with you. Thank you guys so much for watching. Bye.